Special Ad Hoc Committee, March 7th, 2024.
I call the Special Ad Hoc Committee for Rules of Procedure for Bucyrus City Council, Bucyrus Codified Ordinance Chapter 111 Council, Rules of Council, and Bucyrus Codified Ordinance Chapter 113 Ordinances and Resolutions to order at 8:30 p.m. Members present are Carolyn Shireman, Zion Hickman, Chris Moritz, and Vicki DeShawn, myself as chair. First off, public participation. Anybody wish to come to the podium? If they do, please give their name and address. Seeing no one. First on the agenda, rules of procedure for Bucyrus City Council. Councilperson Myers had one change or one addition that he would like to see, and that is under C, miscellaneous, number 1, and I'll wait till everybody gets there, where it states, all requests for legislation shall be submitted using a request for legislation form to be completed by the council clerk and signed by the council president. Well, let's see, wait a minute here. Here's what he wants it to say. All requests for legislation shall be submitted using a request for legislation form to be completed by the council clerk and signed by the president of council when legislation originates from council as a whole, or committee chair when legislation originates from a committee. And that's the only change that he suggested. Did anybody else have any other changes? I mean, I know at our last meeting we'd all approved this, and
is the request for legislation form something that only we do and like other municipalities may or may not do it?
I don't know what other municipalities do.
I mean, where does that originate? Because it's not in the ORC anywhere.
Oh, that originated back when Robert Whitmire was on council.
So then how is that?
But let me explain what it's all about, and it was an excellent idea. It used to be that committee members, and this was when Robert Clark Neff Sr. was the law director and had his office, that is the city office, out of his private office. But the council members would come down to the office and would sit and say, okay, we want legislation to do this. And so we, take notes and write it down. Well, then we'd prepare the legislation. We'd get to a meeting and they'd say, oh no, that's not what I said. This is what I really meant. Well, that just kept happening and happening. And finally, Mr. Whitmire said, you know what? You're going to fill out a form and you're going to say exactly what you want it to say. Well, maybe not exactly, but give us a good idea, because, the law director needs to do his, verbiage and what have you. But it would say when they wanted, the piece of legislation, because, sometimes we wouldn't have it ready. And they'd say, well, we wanted it for the next meeting. Or we'd have it ready and they'd say, no, we didn't want it. So it was to keep them on track, to help us.
And you were employed in that office when
yes,
this happened?
Yes.
I'm so glad that you're still with the city, Vicki.
Are you
the
really,
history and the knowledge, and Bruce too.
Yes.
Bruce too.
Mm-hmm.
But like, just for example, the 6 ordinance thing that Kevin introduced at full council, having not gone through committee last year, that never had a request for legislation paper on it. So is it not like required to have that, and legislation can still be introduced without it if somebody takes it upon themselves to write an ordinance? It's only to officially ask you to do it. Is that what it is, or is it just?
Yeah. So it's
good for my office to have that. I don't know. So in odd scenarios where there is something that council has, somebody on council anticipates coming up or something to that effect, I mean, if you don't have a legislation request and you have gone back and come down to the office or sent me an email and said, this is what I want, this is what we missed, we got to get this, you know, like the mayor, we got to get something approved by, you know, May 1st, and we're at the second meeting in April and we don't have time to run it through committee, or we would have to do it by a special meeting, we can prepare things that way. But I mean, it's just an internal mechanism to keep everybody on the same page.
But it doesn't invalidate that
No.
fire manpower ordinance because it
Oh,
never
no.
had the original
No.
request.
No,
No.
no.
So it's just an extra step that can be used most of the time, but doesn't have to be all the time. If Brian feels like a piece of legislation should be drawn up without request, he can draw it up still anyway, if somebody asks him. This is the way I'm taking it right now.
Okay.
Is it in 111?
Well-
Is it in
113.
111?
No, it's
Codified?
in,
113,
it's, which one?
113. Legislation request is what he's talking about still.
Oh, okay.
It would be in 113.
Yeah. Now, one thing we could do under C miscellaneous, if this would make it more clear, just like, you know, Mr. Myers wanted that section made a little more clear, is, I'm not sure how to do the president of council yet, but we could say that the legislation, or that the request for legislation form is signed by the committee chair for the committee requesting legislation. So that means he's just not requesting it, he's signing it in behalf of the committee requesting the legislation. Is that sort of what you're getting at, Kurt, or?
I'm one of them people that hates paperwork.
And I'm one of those that love.
I know,
paperwork.
that's why we kind of go back and forth. And to me, it's just an extra thing.
Chair
You mean this
DeShawn.
request for legislation form?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there's no way I want that gotten rid of,
I
as
know.
long as I'm on council.
I know.
Well, you should appreciate that as the council president, to help you know what it is that the committees are asking for.
Well, I know what they're asking for because I'm usually sitting in the meeting, but I rarely ever see those papers.
Well,
Rarely.
yeah, and the fact that you don't have to fill them out, or,
And I don't have to touch them.
yeah, they're good, then you don't need to worry about them.
Think that settles that?
So is everybody okay with Mr. Myers' change that he indicated? That is to the rules of procedure? I can't remember, but we'll go ahead and I'll ask for a motion to approve.
I make a motion. I second.
All those in favor? Okey-dokey. Now, Kurt, you were the one that had issues with this quorum matter, which that appears on chapter 111. 113, we'd already approved as a committee. Mr. Myers had no additional changes that he thought should be made, so I think that stands as already approved. Unless someone from the audience had something. Now, I mean, that is, chapter 113 and 111 have had legislation requests done. They've already had their first readings at the last council meeting. because we're not passing them as an emergency. Rules of procedure does not go through council as far as legislation. Council just approves it by voice vote. Was that, maybe, I thought you were concerned about something, Aaron?
No, I was more
Oh.
concerned, sorry. What's the rules on who's where for the committee meetings?
The rules on who's where?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I understand your
Okay,
question.
So the people on the committee
Oh,
are the ones over here versus the ones that aren't on the committee.
oh, you want to know if that's listed in here somewhere?
I mean, it should be listed in there somewhere, but yeah.
I don't think it is it? No, that's not in there.
Because we've done some of that before, so I'm wondering, I hadn't seen it.
Well, and you were at all of our meetings and you didn't say anything before.
Well, because we'd only touched the one part, I wasn't here.
Oh, no, we touched 111 and 113 and rules of procedure. Yeah, you were here for those.
This is still the original one, we just added and subtracted parts of it.
Right, mm-hmm.
So it was never in there originally.
Yeah, it was never in there originally, yeah.
I wonder what we did with that.
Excuse me?
I said that makes me wonder what we did with that. You know what I'm talking, like where we talked about it before, that I kept waiting for it to come up and I'm like, I hadn't heard it.
It's not in there.
Yeah, it's never been in. But that's not to say that it can't be put in. It's just, we looked at the old, that's what we went over, and it wasn't in the old, and then no one said, let's put it in the new.
Now I'm wondering, all the stuff that we went through before, what we're still missing, if there was something else we're missing that we had wanted to add.
Is there another?
Oh, no. Oh, I see what you're talking about. No, when the prior ad hoc
Right.
committee, oh, no, I had all the notes on that. I had what Kevin said, what you said. If you'll remember, I read those.
Right.
And I can tell you that was never discussed, putting that in one of these areas here. And I suppose it probably would be the rules of council, or maybe it could just be in the rules of procedure. But no, that was never, yeah, no. And if I'm understanding you correctly, it's discussing that the committee members will sit up here when their committee's going on, and those who are non-members will sit out in the audience area.
Or,
Yeah,
That
yeah,
part too.
yeah, no. But I mean, are you saying that's something that you would like put in? What's the committee?
well, I mean, we've been doing it, but who's to say, because it gets very confusing when you got somebody that's not a part of the committee sitting there. Because you can end up voting on something, not realizing that you're in the wrong committee because you're in the wrong spot, or, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, well, I definitely agree how we're
Yeah.
doing it is the best way to do it.
So should we have that, is the question at that point.
And I'm fine with, if you would like to add that.
Well, I like sitting up here.
You're not even in a committee.
Well, if I want to converse with Vicky in this meeting right now, and I feel like if I'm sitting in this chair, we can have a lot better discussion than if I'm standing right there.
And you can also, like today, you can also face the,
Well, and then also when somebody was standing up there and I wanted to converse with them, it's better that I'm sitting here rather than him and them and me both standing right there, and it just,
I don't see nothing wrong with the council president sitting there.
Okay, let me ask you this then. And I think Aaron has an excellent point.
yeah.
Is for, to make it easy, because if we put a new section in either chapter 111, which that's probably where it would go, then you're having to give it a new number and then renumber everything else. So are you okay with if we put the fact that the committee, when a committee's going on, this is where they sit, the non-committee members sit out, if we put that just in our rules of procedure,
I mean, that makes sense, I mean,
and we could put that under the miscellaneous,
Right. See,
yeah, under C. And, yeah, we may have to, do some, that's easy to do, number changes there. Do you want to figure out now what you want the verbiage to say? Or do you want to leave
Pretty
that
much.
up?
Let's leave up to you. You're the best verbiage anyway.
Well,
It's semantics.
well, yes, and I'll tell you what I can do, because I believe this is proper, is if I can type up the suggested language, email it to Miranda, Miranda can turn around and email it to the committee. We'll be happy to include you, Aaron, and then you can let her know if you're fine with it. Does that sound good?
Thumbs up.
Okay.
Well, just for committee members, I
I
please don't
think
take
Kurt
my
should be able
ability
to
away
sit
to me
there all
for
the time.
me sitting in on these occasionally. when-
Well, and I suppose as far as that goes, send it to all the
Everybody committee, yeah.
council
Council
people, because they're gonna eventually, I mean, they're gonna have to approve this, so, yeah, I wasn't thinking. Okay, so we've taken care of that.
Can we lead into the stuff that we learned at the conference now, or?
Oh, at the conference? Well, no, because this is just to talk about,
Yeah.
no, I thought you wanted to make a change on something. You were the whole one that started.
Well, so
I mean, I guess.
it is related to this.
Okay, okay.
It is related to this because if changes are made, they would be made in the 111. And so when we were at the OML conference, because this has always been a question, is what is four, when you have four on a committee, is two a quorum? Or does it have to be three to be the quorum? Well, we did, after 2000, we did put in the 111 dot,
08.
Quorum.
yeah, quorum here. That was, and you can see it was passed 9/1 of 20. 4 members of council constitute a quorum, while 3 members of a standing committee constitute a quorum of said committee. And I think the reason that was put in there, and you were in these discussions, Vicki, was to clear that up, clear that question up. And so when we're down at this, and you still kind of, I think, didn't you still have some reservations about it though? Was like, is 3 or 4, you know, are 4-person committees the right number? And we asked,
Well, my concern was, because 4 members of council constitute a quorum, I had questioned, as had former council member Doug Fote questioned, well, then you come along and you have how many do we have on committee? 4. Then we have a 4-member committee. Are we not only then having a committee meeting, but are we also having a council meeting, because we're having a quorum of the council as well?
yeah, you've mentioned this multiple times over the last 4 years.
Right,
I
and-
remember this, and when we were at the conference, this Stephen Smith, the second speaker, we went up there together and asked him, at one point you did ask him that, well, is having 4 people on a committee, is that having a council meeting then? And he said, no, it's not.
Yes.
He did say that, because he said, well, that body is not what's meeting, it's the committee body is what's meeting. But the other question we asked him was, on a 4-person committee, is 2 a quorum or is 3 a quorum? And he said, 3 is a quorum. So then I asked him, okay, if 3 is a quorum and 2 is not a quorum, how many votes does it take on that committee to advance something out of the committee? He said 3. 3 yes votes. So then he's like, whoa, and then he kind of like backtracked. He said, well, wait a minute. He said, what does your ordinance say? What does your ordinance say? And I said, it doesn't say. It's silent. So then it basically defaults to Robert's rules at that point. And he said, well, you can make your ordinance say something else. Because that's basically what the ORC has done with pertaining to specifically the council meeting as a whole. ORC has restricted my ability to vote. I can only vote in a tie on council as a whole, but if ORC would be silent,
Right.
I believe under Robert's rules, I would be able to make motions, vote. But regardless of that, ORC is silent on committees. ORC does not specifically regarding the number you gotta have and what makes the quorum and stuff like that. So it basically defaults to Robert rules unless we as a city pass something in the 111 changing that. So now that we know that, and it does say in the 11108, while 3 members of a standing committee constitute a quorum, that right there is just further solidifying you need 3 yes votes to advance something out of committee on a 4-person committee.
And I guess.
And we've historically only been advancing things out with 2 yes votes.
That's because at that time, we didn't think that the chairperson.
Yeah,
could
we
vote unless it was a tie.
didn't think, we were assuming all these years that the chairperson was not a countable vote. But now that we learn that they are, do we want to change things? I personally, I like the idea that the chair can vote, the chair can second motions. I don't want to restrict the chair's ability on committees to participate in that committee. But, and then furthering on that, he said, you know, you could even write in your 111, I'm calling it 111, he don't know that it's our 111, he's just calling it our ordinance. But we could write in the ordinance that in a scenario that one of the 4 committee members is absent,
That's where I want to get to next.
then the quorum becomes 2 instead of 3, so that they could still conduct business at that point in absence of one of the members.
Because if we did, then we couldn't conduct.
So I almost, where I'm going with this is I almost think that the 11108, 4 members of a council constitute a quorum, while 3 members of a standing 4-person committee constitute a quorum of said committee, except when one person is absent on committee, then 2 members constitute a quorum at that particular meeting.
So I think you're using quorum and passage. So quorum just means enough people of the committee showing up to have a meeting. That has nothing to do with how many people are necessary to pass things. Those are dissimilar, different things. I don't
But
think
do
that,
we want to clarify the
I think,
difference?
right, I think that changing I don't know that you can change a quorum just means a majority of the members of the body, right? So that's why it's 3, or that's why it's 4. Because 7 people are on council, so you need 4 to be a quorum, 3 of 4. You could mess with what it takes to pass legislation if only 3 people were here, because you still, if 3 people show up, you still have a quorum, but that would be a little odd, because then you would only need 2 people to pass
then
things.
you need unanimous. You need unanimous.
Yeah, unless you messed with the rules and said you only need 2, a 2/3 vote if there's only 3 people here, but you need a 3/4 vote if there's 4 people. I don't know. You guys can do it, but I would almost like to see how some other councils have come up with a solution to that issue while also not restricting the authority of, because the easy fix is either A, don't make the chairperson a member of the committee.
Which I don't like that
Right.
idea, because I like the ability that if Vicky wants to make a motion,
Right.
if Vicky wants to second something,
Right.
as chair, she
And then,
can.
yeah, and then the second easy fix, which would be to cut your committees to 3, but then you guys had discussed the fact
Well-
that down at the OML, they said,
He
yeah,
said,
which
"Whoa,
every
he said,
time
you
2
do
people
not-"
talk.
He said he hates 3-person committees.
Yeah.
Now, to me, if I have appointed somebody to, I kind of make the suggestion at the beginning of the 2-year term, who's on what committees, and somebody has worked their way up, and they are now chair of the finance committee, and all these years they were a voting member, I think they should still retain their right to vote, because they have earned that, why move up to be chair and then lose your right on that committee to do anything?
Okay, let me ask you this then. Are you fine, Mr. Gernert, with checking in to see what some other municipalities are doing, language-wise, whatever? And we'll just, now, keeping in mind that this has already had its first reading, so is this something that we're gonna want you to check on, and we have a special meeting of the ad hoc before we have our next council meeting?
We could still, at the next council meeting, vote to table it.
Okay,
Yeah. We
I'm
could
like,
vote to table it, we
Okay.
could vote to send it back to committee.
You'd have to, if something has to be changed, you'd have to send it back to committee, and at that
Okay.
point, we can schedule it at that.
Do you have any questions, Aaron, that you wanted to, okay. So then, is that okay with everybody?
That is, yeah.
Is there something that's not okay?
I was thinking back on that Saturday also. Wasn't it also brought up that, that you are not the only one that can bring forward legislation to committees? Say somebody from the city wrote up their own legislation, wanted to present it to committee to be in there?
Well, there was ballot initiative way that the citizens could initiate
Yeah.
10%, they would have to get
Yeah.
10% of people signing a petition, and then, once they gather the 10% signatures, things like of the last governor's race, is that where they're getting the 10%?
Yeah, that was.
And then they bring this piece of legislation that they want passed, or put on the ballot or something, to the council clerk with the petition, and then the council clerk has to present it to council, and I think council's forced to put it on the ballot.
Yep.
I think that's what he
Yep,
said.
that's what he did say, yeah. That's one thing that was hitting me when you guys were talking about legislation.
Theoretically, somebody in the public could bring forth a piece of legislation, bring it to committee, we would discuss it, and then it would go to my office to polish it and put on the.
I don't even think you need a
necessary
10% for that. That was for a different part of it. But for legislation, anybody can bring one in and present it.
What?
What you just said.
Oh, yeah, you don't need 10%, just.
Yeah, that's what-
bring it to
yeah.
the committee.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying too, yeah.
What, you got
Okay.
something you're working on?
No. I just remembered that part of it.
So, are you all done with discussion on that? If so, any more public participation? Seeing no one, I adjourn the meeting at 8:58 PM.
Under 3 hours.